Thank you. Good morning, Truckee. It is March. We're here to talk about snow, and we don't have any, but we're going to have some good presenters on it. So, my name is Raven Whittington. I'm an attorney with Porter Simon Sierra Injury Lawyers. I am the past board president for the Chamber of Commerce. I'm your MC this morning. So, we have speakers from various outdoor and snow-related organizations this morning. We're going to have Ann Nolin from POW Alliance, which is Protect Our Winners, and she's a professor at UNR. We have Ian Bolliger, a local member of POW's Science Alliance. I like how that rhymes. You got a good one there. All right. We have David Reichel, executive director of the Sierra Avalanche Center, and the nonprofit spotlight this morning will be Sherry McConkey with the Shane McConkey Foundation. Before we get into the speakers, we're going to thank our sponsors. The presenting sponsors are the Tahoe Forest Health System and Kelly Brothers Painting. The latte sponsors are Goldring Travel, PT Revolution, Town of Truckee, Moonshine Inc., Tahoe Truckee Media, Tahoe Truckee Unified School District, Sierra Sun 101.5, Truckee Tahoe Radio, Porter Simon Law, Auerbach Engineering Corporation, and Wild Cherries Coffee, who is now providing the coffee this morning. Cappuccino sponsors are Boreal Mountain Resort in Woodward, Tahoe, East River Public Relations and Marketing, JKAE, Tykert, Elder Group, Tahoe Real Estate, Chase International, Village Camp, Truckee, Trout Creek Outfitters, Mountain Hardware and Sports, Martis Valley Mobile Notary, Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. The Espresso sponsors are Tahoe Dave Ski and Board, Peak Digital Studio, Mountain Lincoln Construction, Visit Truckee Tahoe, Dixon Realty, and Lyft Co-work Conference and Wellness Center. Thank you to all our sponsors. All right. Yes. Thanks for the staff and the staff of the Chamber for putting this on. Thank you for the town for letting us be here. Thank you to Tahoe Truckee Media and Rory in the back handling all the AV. And I think that is it for the thanks. Now let's go to you. We're going to go around. Everybody introduce themselves briefly, who they are, and if they have any affiliations. Let's start right here in front of me.
It says Sierra Avalanche Center, so that is my affiliation.
All right. Jump back.
Billy, I'm with Snow Bros.
Alyssa, no affiliation, Truckee Roundhouse.
Kate with Streamscapes.
Megan with Sugar Bowl.
All right. Let's go back here.
I'm Emma with Elder Group Tahoe.
Good morning, Dr. Barry Treisman, local chiropractor.
Good morning, Scott with Trout Creek Outfitters.
Good morning, Kim McCarl with Tahoe Forest. We have little things on your table that have a QR code. We would love for you to fill out our survey.
Good morning, Anna Roth, Tahoe Forest.
Alex Ganowski, Truckee Donner PV.
All right. Let's jump back here, Christy.
Christy Darjan-Kevich, Nonprofit Council.
Eric Goldring Travel.
Rob Darjan-Kevich, Tahoe Forest, board member.
Emily Lane, Ridge to Ridge Marketing. You are all invited to my gift showcase this Thursday at the Hub. Flyers are on the table. Check out some pretty cool swag.
All right, let's go all the way back.
Ian Anderson, PT Revolution.
Caroline with the Transportation Management Association.
Rachel with Granite Peak Management.
Jackie with Visit Truckee Tahoe.
Jet, just listening.
Emma, local attorney.
Jenny Kendrick with East River PR and Marketing.
Brad Ellis, North Tahoe Water Sports.
Judith Klein, Lewis and Associates.
Thanks. Let's run the back row.
Nicole, Truckee Cookies. Amy Wood, Tahoe Daves.
Autumn Lincoln, Tahoe Daves.
Amy Stewart, Nevada County. Jessica Penman, President and CEO of the Truckee Chamber.
Amber, how about you?
Amber Burke, I'm with the school district and I also am on the board of the chamber.
Jennifer with JKAE, and I'm a Chamber Master.
Kelly with the cultural district and the Truckee Chamber.
You're on your table.
Jan Zabriskie, Truckee Town Council, Nevada County Transportation Commission.
Greg Zerwold, President of the Museum of Truckee History and Truckee Donner Historical Society. Lee Tower, just various first.
All right.
Hi, Cindy Rogers, skier and homeowner.
I'm Jack Ellis with the Civil Air Patrol.
Corey Caldwell from the Truckee Trails Foundation.
My name is Lizzie. I'm a local massage therapist.
Back.
Michael Piatti, JMT Wilderness Conservancy.
Richard Anderson, Truckee Rotary and Truckee River Watershed Council.
Ursula Arena, JMT Wilderness Conservancy.
Elizabeth Wainscoat, Plumas Bay.
All right, Hillary, how about your table?
Hillary, Town of Truckee.
Jeff, Tech Futures Group.
John Adams, visitor, Appleton Sustainability Advisory Panel.
Nate Calabro, Math and Physics tutoring with Math.
Heather with SOS Outreach.
All right, anybody I forget? Tricia?
Hi, I'm Tricia Stickney. I'm the Membership and Programs Manager for the Truckee Chamber.
Okay, thank you for all being here, and we're going to start off unless this schedule has changed on me. And Nolin, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, welcome. Thank you.
Great. And this is the slide advancer?
Yes.
Does it have a laser pointer? It really doesn't matter. I can point with my finger. There we go.
So just on the right.
Yeah. Classic. Good. Does anyone want to move up? Because I have a lot of like graphs, and I know people you probably just want to sit in the back row. And that means, and I told Barry this, that means I'll call on you. Shauna's really nice, and you can sit next to her.
I don't budge.
Yeah, she's cool. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'm the first speaker. Hopefully, I'll take just 15 minutes of your time. We'll hold questions till the very end, and. Stays together. There we go. Right, so mine is called Waning Winters, which it's sort of an Elmer Fudd thing, like waning winters. Like, because our winters are raining in addition to waning, right? Especially this last month. And I'll talk about the future of snow because that's the theme today. So my overview is quickly the trends in snow cover that we've seen in the recent decades and the impacts of that declining snow on our forests, particularly the Sierra Nevada forests, and this relationship between snow and fire, how snow is important before a fire, what happens to the snowpack after a fire, and then the future of snow in the Truckee River Basin, the Upper Colorado River Basin, and then back east. If anybody here from like Vermont area, learned to ski in Vermont, me, yeah, that was a thing. But yeah, and in that cold area as well. And then I want to put in a pitch for our mountain, rain, or snow project. So stay attentive to that. So snow cover trends. This is, I'm going to go from the hemisphere to the western U.S. and then to more closer to our region. And just to situate you, this is the North Pole right here. Here's Greenland. Here's North America and Alaska, right? And here's the western U.S. And everywhere that you see sort of red and orange, it's a decrease in the extent of snow cover, the change in snow covered days over the decade. And where you see blue, that's an increase, and there really isn't much of an increase. Only in a very few places do you see increases, and those increases are not due to temperature. Those are due to shifts in atmospheric circulation patterns, the things that bring the storms. So this is from several decades. So what you see is that we do have a decline in the extent of snow cover, and these are data from satellites. It's not climate models. So if it is a climate model, I will tell you. If it's data that we've collected from sites, I will tell you that. These are data from SNOWTEL sites, and the SNOWTEL site is an automated snow monitoring system operated by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And on the left-hand side, these are storm days when it was precipitating. This is across the western U.S. And on the right-hand side are two plots that up and down that show dry days, so when it wasn't precipitating in the winter. These are winter only. And this goes from 1984 to I think it was 2019, something like that. And everywhere that you see a blue dot, it means that it was getting colder, and if you see a red dot, it means those storm days were getting warmer. And there's two of them because one is the maximum temperature and one is the minimum temperature, the cold temperature for that day, and the other is the maximum temperature for that day. And I want to point out though that all the days, whether it's storming or not, are getting warmer across the western U.S. But in particular, the storm days are getting warmer faster than the dry days our winter storms are getting warmer. That means that when it does snow, the snow that falls that creates our snowpack is warmer. So we're creating warmer snowpacks that don't take as much energy, as much solar energy, as much air temperature to eventually to melt. The other plot here from the same student, it's showing that where you have a blue dot, it shows that you have more dry days. So that it's over this period of time, again from the 80s till I think it was 2019, that it was November is getting drier. And the reason this was important, we looked at all the months, but it was really interesting, statistically significant that November was getting drier, because that means we have a longer dry season. And those of you who live here, you probably know that, you know, we used to have a fair amount of snow in November. It was like, yeah, let's ski over Thanksgiving and sometimes even on Halloween. And nowadays, you know, it's really hit or miss whether or not we get snow in November. So this has a lot of bearing for recreation, but also for the length of the fire season. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting this back on here. It's not staying. That's all right. I'll just do this. Okay, so this is a study that I did with some satellite data that showed the trend in the date of disappearance in the spring for snow. And what I wanted to look at was, again, from this satellite record, in this case, it's from the NASA instrument called MODIS, which was started transmitting data in 2000. And so I was looking at snow disappearance date, the date when the snow's all gone. And these grid cells, these pixels, are about 500 meters on a side. And so you can see that where you have brown and sort of yellow, that means the snow disappearing earlier. Where you have like green, that means the snow's lasting a little bit longer. But for the most part, the snow's disappearing several days earlier. Again, this is statistically significant. These red outlines are some of the big fires, like the Dixie Fire, the Caldor Fire, the Creek Fire, Tamarack Fire. So some of these big fires that we've had in recent years. So snow's disappearing earlier, so it's melting earlier, and we know that because it's warmer too. And springs tend to be warmer, the air temperature in the spring's warmer. But then what does this do to our forests? We have a longer dry season, the snow's disappearing earlier in the spring, and snow represents that nice moisture subsidy for right, it doesn't really rain in the summer here very much, right? In fact, spring tends to be pretty dry, and so snow is that moisture that sort of carries the soil moisture for the vegetation from the wet season into the dry season. But when you have snow disappearing earlier and a longer dry season, by the end of the summer, those trees are really struggling to photosynthesize. They actually get a little bit dormant, not because of cold, and this is September, but because they just don't have enough water. And so what I'm showing you here is the trend in photosynthesis in September. And what you see is that everywhere you have these brown grid cells, that means the trees have a negative trend in photosynthesis in September. That is, they're browning. They're not turning brown, they're evergreen trees, but they're just not photosynthetically active. That means they're not storing carbon, and it also means that it's a lot easier for them to get sick and die. But we have kind of overgrown forests anyways. This is sort of nature taking its course. But I do want to point out that the trends are really strong in the lower part of the Sierra, and that's where you have the snow melting off a lot faster earlier, right? That lower, that drier, the warmer areas where the snowpack melts a lot earlier. But the other thing that's interesting is that you have all of this happening anywhere. Like, we have fires here, here. You know, all of these fires have occurred, these big fires from 2020, 2021, and 2022. And it could have happened anywhere. It's just that we had ignitions in these places. So there was no statistically significant relationship between what was going on with the snow disappearance date and these fires. And there was no statistically significant relationship between the location of the fires and the forest browning, meaning it could have happened anywhere. And probably will happen in other places. It's already primed for this because of the hot summers and the snowpack. And so one of the things that several of us published a number of years ago was this relationship between fire and where we typically have snow in the winter. And so this goes back to 2001, again, actually goes back to 2000, but in 2001 out to, in this case, 2021. Remember 2020 and 2021 where we had a bunch of big fires, Caldor, Dixie Fire, some of these others. And you can see the fire detections, like this is the count of fires. So if it's in the non-seasonal, if it's in an area where there's typically no snow, it's gray. So we look at the count of fires, so it'd be this top line here, and everything below it is in gray. Now, if it's in the, what we call the ephemeral snow zone, where it snows and then it melts, maybe snows a little bit more and then it melts again, that's this red zone. And then the seasonal snow zone, typically we don't have very many fires in that zone. This is the little addition here, this little extra blue, except in these recent years. And in fact, so typically the fires are kind of lower elevation. But more recently, the seasonal snow zone, because you have a lot of trees, a lot of fuel, and it's been drying out earlier because of the loss of snowpack, you have a lot more fires in this zone, like in the Caldor fire, where it actually burned all the way up and over the crest there. And same thing with the Dixie Fire. And so you have more fires in the seasonal snow zone in these 2 years than you had in all the previous years combined. So that was kind of a big deal for us to see that. What happens after a fire is in the area where we have severe burn, and this is from the Creek Fire, which is Huntington Lake and Shaver Lake area, east of Fresno on the west side. But Caldor Fire looks like this too. So you have all of these burnt, these charred trees, and then the carbon, the char sheds on the snowpack the winter after the fire, and you can see how dark it is here. But the other thing is that there's no canopy anymore to shade the trees, and so you have all this extra sunlight coming in, and then that snowpack is preconditioned to absorb that solar radiation because it's really dark. And this, I just sort of picked up a bunch of snow in my hand and kind of crushed it like that, and this is what it looks like. It's really dark and dirty and melts really quickly. This is not a one-year thing. My former PhD student, Kelly Gleason at Portland State, has been looking at this for years, mainly in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. But she's found that this effect lasts for up to 15 years, maybe even longer, the dirty snow effect, the fact that it melts out days earlier. So before a fire, snow matters. After a fire, the fire affects the snow and makes it melt earlier. So in a world where we have snow melting out earlier, creating this longer dry season, and then after fire, the post-fire effects cause the snow to melt out earlier, it's really changing the hydrology in our watersheds, in our local watersheds. And it's changing our local climate because it changes the reflectivity of the region. If there's no snow, it's darker. It changes a lot of different things. So I wanted to show, now these are climate model results, and I know in the back you probably can't see it, but that's okay. I'll walk you through it. So I wanted to know, what does the future snow look like in terms of like what I would call a warm winter? And so a warm winter is where any of the core winter months, like where it's normally really cold, December, January, February, DJF. Okay, so if any one of those months has a monthly average temperature above freezing, right? For the month, the monthly average temperature above freezing, I'm going to call that a warm winter. That means that the snow, if it does fall as snow, it's pretty warm, or it's probably going to fall as rain. But anyways, that's a warm winter. So I looked at 3 different watersheds because I'm a snow hydrologist, so I care about the water stuff. I'm also a skier. So, and this is my 63rd year of skiing. Okay, yes. Okay, so here is Lake Tahoe, just for reference. And here is the upper Truckee River Basin, right? And so this is the historic period, 1970 to 2000. So that's kind of our 30 years of reference. So this is sort of averaged over this period. And so if it's blue, that's more or less like no 0% chance of a warm winter. We're talking about probability, how the chance of a warm winter. But if it's red, if you're down here at Pyramid Lake or lower, you know, it's pretty much 100% chance of a warm winter, right? It's pretty low elevation. Now, if we have sort of the run-of-the-mill, business as usual climate model output, if we look at kind of the mid-century, this is what that looks like. And you, again, look at the Truckee River Basin, and you can see like the high elevation area, and this is around Mount Rose, is still kind of blue, but there's a lot of areas that are sort of yellow and red, like 50 to 75% of the winters warm. And actually, when we zoomed in on this, because the grid cell size was modest enough that we could look at areas that were like the base area of Palisades versus the top of the lift, we could see that the base area was really high probability of a warm winter. If we have a much more aggressive climate change scenario, which is kind of the track that we're on now, you can see almost all the winters, 90% of the winters in the upper Truckee River Basin are warm. And then when we get to the end of the century, it's 100% of the core winter months are warm. Probably not warm enough for snow. It doesn't mean it would never snow. It's just in a probability sense, we're really talking about some limited snow. So, yeah, okay. So this is towards that. So Colorado headwaters, it's colder. This is the upper part of the Colorado. There's the upper Connecticut. So we're talking about Vermont. Pretty cold. That's where I learned to ski. It's really cold. And even in these relatively aggressive, you're still going to be getting snow in Vermont. Chilly enough. And the same thing for the Colorado, upper Colorado River headwaters. Doesn't mean you won't have warm winters, but okay, so I wanted to put in a pitch for mountain, rain, or snow, and this is my second to last slide. So if you want to take a picture of this QR code, or you can just type in rainorSnow.org. And why this is so great is it's a NASA-funded project that I'm doing with a bunch of folks from Desert Research Institute, University of Vermont, a group that's based in Boulder, Colorado, that works with a consulting firm, Linker. Anyways, we use your observations to tell us what the phase of the precip is. Is it raining, snowing, or mixed precip? So it's great. It really is helpful because there really aren't any good measurements of precip phase. And the warmer that it gets and the warmer these storms are, the more we're going to be getting rain or mixed precipitation. But we really care about what that is along elevations like like along I-80. It's important not just for recreation, but it's also important for whether or not they close I-80, if it's going to rain or snow. So I had to put in a gratuitous ski slide and a dog slide. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Are these your glasses?
Oh, I have glasses. Thank you.
All right, up next we have Ian Bolliger, a local member of POW's Science Alliance. Ian, did I get it right this time? Didn't put an N in there?
Pretty good, pretty good. Let's see. Cool. Always fun to go after someone who gives talks for a living here. Nice work, Anne. I'm going to talk a little bit about what this means from an economic cost standpoint. What I do in my day job when I'm not volunteering with Protect Our Winters like Anne, I work for a small company called REASC. We build models of extreme weather risk, and our specialty is how do you account for the changing risk due to a changing climate. So I don't actually deal a lot with snow at the moment in my day job, but I'll just give you a little bit of a background on myself to talk about why snow is important to me, and it actually has really shaped my career path so far. This is me a couple years ago. I grew up outside of Seattle, and much like the Tahoe Basin, the mountains, the ski areas around the Central Cascades are often right at that snow, like rain or snow line. So it's hard to not see, growing up kind of in the 90s, 2000s, it's hard to not see the influence of climate change, particularly in those mountain environments. So I think that was one of the things that really ingrained in me an interest in continuing this work. I moved down here to California for grad school. I went to Berkeley and worked with this group called the Climate Impact Lab. And we were focused on trying to quantify the economic impacts of climate change, mostly for policymaking purposes. And that's kind of continued on throughout what I do, but it's shifted a little bit in terms of the application. So moving from policy, I then worked in finance to try and help understand how we can make investments more resilient to climate change and push flows of capital towards a more resilient economy. And now I end up at RIAS, where we're focused mostly on this, kind of zeroing in on this extreme weather focus. And so we do a lot on hurricanes, which fortunately we don't have to deal with too much here in Truckee, but also wildfires and droughts, which is obviously something quite relevant to our community, as Anne was just speaking about. So that's a little bit of my perspective, or a little bit of context for my perspective here. And really what I'm going to talk about today is climate risk, and I wanted to just throw up one slide here to describe what I mean when I say risk. And there's really three components to this kind of standard framework that gets used frequently. One is the physical hazard, and so that's the changing climate, which Anne gave us a really good rundown for the local impacts, particularly with respect to snow and fire. But that's just one piece of it. There's also the exposure, so that's like how much of the stuff we care about is in the areas that are experiencing this change. So that's population, that's buildings, that's agriculture, et cetera. It really matters where is the change happening relative to where the people are and where the stuff is. And then finally, there's vulnerability. So that's how can we, or how resilient are our communities, our economies to these changes. And so changes in risk are not only associated with the change in climate, although that's a big part of it, but also how are we responding as a society to make ourselves more resilient to that, in addition to trying to mitigate climate change by reducing emissions. All right, this is supposed to have a cover of one of POW, Protect Our Winters, recent reports called The Cost of Inaction, which is actually what I'm going to talk about, some case studies from that report for the rest of the talk here, because that has a lot of good local anecdotes about, or local case studies, I should say, about impacts to this region. It's not, I should say, I can't take credit for any of the really good work that happened in this report. It wasn't something that I did, but it was a collaboration between POW and a bunch of master's students at the University of Colorado. So this is kind of the general high-level idea behind it. It does focus a lot on disasters, or what you might call extreme events. And you can see just the magnitude of the costs. This is in the US. The magnitude of the costs that we're seeing from these extreme weather events. That's not like this is the cost of climate change. That's extreme weather events as a whole. These things happen all the time. We know that, but climate change is affecting their frequency and their intensity. In particular, we've seen almost a 50% increase since the 2010s. But if you think back to my slide a couple slides ago, that's not just a change in climate. The change in climate is a big part of that, but we're also developing in these areas that are high risk. So there's increasing costs from the point of view of like, how do we manage this? In some ways, it doesn't matter. It's coming from climate change. It's also coming from increased development. We need to find ways to mitigate that. Powell likes to focus a lot on the outdoor recreation economy, and obviously that's a big part of our economy in the basin. So these are just a few numbers to give you a sense of the size of the outdoor recreation economy. Obviously, there's multiple ways to quantify that, but just kind of as a reference there, that 2.3% sounds kind of small, but it is bigger than the farming and mining industries combined. So it's like a very big portion of the U.S. economy, and obviously in our region, it's an even bigger part. So exactly that. Zooming in on the Tahoe Basin economy, it's about a $5 billion annual economy here, and over half of that, roughly 60% of that, is tied to visitor services. So there's another number in there. This comes from the state forester, I believe, in Nevada, quoting the percent of Nevada's total economic value that's tied to recreation and tourism. So this is just to say that this is a recreation, tourism, a huge part of our economy that probably goes without saying to all of you here. What part of the report focuses on the kind of like regionality, the fraction of counties in each state that are at risk for wildfire impacts on their local economy, and that ties into tourism in particular. And so there's kind of 4 main recreation-dependent counties in Nevada. They have these same stats for California, but this was just kind of a clearer example, and all of them are exposed to, their economies are all exposed to increasing fire risk. So a couple case studies here. The first is going to be the Caldor fires. The second is going to be the LA fires. So this is just a few additional, like I mentioned, stats on not just the fire itself, but the impacts of the fire downstream. So obviously a huge part comes from casino gaming. There's just less visitation as a whole. So the casino gaming was easy to quantify, but in reality, all aspects of the economy that are affected by visitation are going to be experiencing some similar drops in revenue. And just that little stat at the bottom, it was the lowest gaming revenue, again, proxy for kind of the lowest visitation outside of closures for the pandemic. This is just an estimated loss in visitor spending by city or county there. And you can see in the Lake Tahoe area, South Lake Tahoe, we're experiencing some of the biggest impacts from lack of visitation. So if we think about the climate change impacts, we think about a potential for larger fires, tying back to exactly what Ann was saying, where we have this kind of feedback for shorter winters, longer dry periods, increasing possibility of larger fires. This is tying into a greater likelihood for some of these economic impacts to happen on a more frequent basis. And this is kind of conceptual, but this is just talking about how this economic impacts kind of proceed through the economy. So obviously we have the wildfire and the smoke itself. We have access to these regions that are disrupted by fire. We also have poor air quality that's preventing kind of experiencing outdoor activities. So you get visitors staying away, and obviously revenue is declining. So again, there's the state forester was one of many interviews conducted as part of the study, and there's a lot of good quotes from there on just understanding how intricately tied Nevada's economy is to visitation. So this is a piece that is actually quite relevant to what I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm not focused on the LA fires in particular, but with respect to insurance, I'm sure all of you, especially any of you that are homeowners in the area, have probably thought about this a lot, are probably familiar with increasing insurance lately. And that is the reality that we live in right now, where the regime of fires is changing. Our risk for fires is still somewhat uncertain. There's a lot of folks out there that are trying to get a better grasp on that, our company included. But the reality is that we don't exactly have a precise sense of what exactly is the risk of what used to be a 1 in 100 year fire event. How do we precisely quantify that today? So how that manifests and how we experience it is in increasing insurance prices. So there's an increasing risk, there's increasing uncertainty in that risk. The insurance companies are raising prices to match that increasing risk. So this is just a couple of statistics again from the LA fires. In terms of how many houses were affected and what that meant for their insurance. There was a bunch of non-renewals. There was also a surge in home insurance premiums. This is kind of a longer story that I'm happy to talk about later, but just to highlight that in addition to the kind of recreation economy impacts, we have the like residential economy or home ownership and insurance impacts in the region. Cool. So just kind of tying this all together a little bit, Anne really focused on this like first box here of what this means for our snow and our winters. But then I just kind of threw a couple examples here of what that means from an economic standpoint. Obviously, the ski economy, which is a big part of our region, is affected. Water storage and water resources is a big piece of that that comes into play with shorter and smaller water storage in snowpack during the winter, and then soil moisture as it ties into wildfire concerns later on. So then that's trickling into potential for larger wildfires and smoke, and we touched on two of those kind of sector impacts there in both the tourism and the insurance side. And then finally, there's kind of the indirect economic costs. So if you are getting higher insurance prices, that's affecting home prices, that's affecting the local tax revenue, et cetera. So there are these kind of downstream impacts that get harder and harder to quantify the further from the direct impacts that you get, but still are something that's quite relevant for our community. Cool. So most of what I do is in quantifying the risk. It's not necessarily in like, how do we solve the problem? But I do want to talk about like conceptually, what are the different levers we can pull to help address this? Most obviously, there's reducing emissions to reduce climate change, right? That's something that we should all be aware of. That's actually one of the justifications or the reasons why POW created this report. They're mostly using it to present to policymakers to push for clean energy development as a path towards reducing emissions so that we can reduce these impacts on the entire economy, but we're highlighting the impacts on the outdoor recreation economy. But there's many ways to reduce emissions, and that should be obviously our primary goal. But given that climate change is happening, even under the most rosy scenarios about reducing emissions, we are going to experience substantial climate change in the coming decades. So we need to also think about adaptation and resilience. So what does that mean? That means we can build resilience kind of from a physical standpoint. That's fire hardening, that's defensible space enforcement, et cetera. That's like those sorts of things that make our communities more resilient to these changes, particularly in wildfire. And there's also the economic, like the makeup of the local economy. And so this is more easier said than done, but it's something that I think our community will need to think about going forward. Is if we get more and more of these times at which tourism is affected, the more intricately tied to that as as a key driver of our economy, the greater the impacts are going to be. So the diversification of the economy is something that, in the end, can be increase our resilience to some of these events. And again, one of the things that POW is focusing on with this report is the clean energy economy, and we have a lot of opportunities in the area. California, Nevada have a lot of clean energy development opportunities, and that's one way to diversify the economy that also touches on reducing emissions. But just more broadly speaking, I think it's something that bears thinking about as we move forward with how tied our local economies are to these events that have disruptions from major fire. Okay, that's cool. That's all I got, and we'll move on.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, up next we have Andrew Shorts, who is the director of the Central Sierra Snow Laboratory. Welcome, Andrew.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, yeah. There we go. Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm the director of the UC Berkeley Central Sierra Snow Lab. My research has a lot of overlap with Dr. Ann Nolin, and so you'll see some common threads between our two perspectives, but we're going to talk more about the Truckee region and what lies in store for us. Of course, we're up on Donner Summit, so it's going to be local. First, we're going to start somewhere that we normally think of in terms of kind of a similar climate to us, and that's Mauna Loa in Hawaii. Which, by the way, we're supposed to be warmer than Maui today. So who's seen this before? Raise a hand. You're all hip with it, right? Cool people. So we've got this curve. This is a measure of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere since the 60s. We see a rise. One of my favorite things about this plot is you can see the Earth breathing. And what I mean by that is you see these sawtooth lines. When you see those valleys in the red line, that's when northern hemisphere summer is occurring. All our vegetation is breathing, it's sucking in that carbon dioxide, and it draws it down. In the winter, when it stops breathing, we get our leaves falling off the trees. It goes back up, so you can actually see the Earth breathing. So yeah, very similar to Truckee is Mauna Loa, maybe just because it's a mountain, but this is what we see in response to that Keeling curve, okay? If you look at the second half of this, basically 1960 through, that curve of warming globally follows what that carbon dioxide concentration does very closely, right? We see that really taking off. And boy, was 2024 an intense year. And with El Nino coming, it may be higher than that in the upcoming summer. But this is what we see driving things around the world. And like Ann did, I'm going to take you from here's what's going on in the world to here's what's going on at Donner Summit. So I came out here in 2021. I came out from Australia where I was wrapping up some graduate work that I was doing. And one of my favorite things to do is move somewhere new because weather patterns, things that affect an area's climate are different everywhere. So it's a learning experience. So I got here, I took some of the work that I was doing in Australia and said, let's use some of that wonderful Snow Lab long-term records to look at how things are changing on the summit. So these records that were used for this go back basically to 1970, but we have other records that go back to the lab's beginning in 1946. So what I did was look at the minimum daily temperatures that were plotted and the maximum daily temperatures for each month through our cold season here. And then fit what we call Thiel-Sen slope lines to these. So those are those dotted lines, if you can kind of see them there, that show a trend. Now, in terms of having consistent snowpack on Donner Summit, we want our minimum temperatures to be below freezing, right? If we don't get below freezing, the snowpack disappears very, very quickly. So when we created this, we went ahead and looked at all these different things, and there's this little gray line. I don't know if you guys can see it, but about halfway, a little bit less than halfway up the plot, that's our 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit line. We want to stay below that. And so when we looked at this, first thing that we noticed were that October and May have already transitioned to warm temperature months that are somewhat inhospitable for consistent snowpack. And this isn't surprising, right? We saw in 2021, we had a 4-foot snowstorm on Donner Summit and it melted within 2 weeks, basically at the beginning of November. And we see these starting to transition over time. And I highlighted each box in a different color. You can see what those represent on the left. But November is quickly transitioning over. We can see January and April doing the same. All kinds of good news, right? Because none of us like snow. But this is what's going on in terms of our temperatures on Donner Summit, okay? So we wanted to take that a step further and say, how is that affecting our precipitation? Well, we know that rain happens here. One of the reasons, in fact, the major reason the location for the Snow Lab was chosen was because it is a snow-dominated climate with plenty of rain that occurs. So this has always happened, but is the fraction of those two things changing? And these plots, similar to the ones for temperature before, but are blue asterisks that kind of look like snowflakes, designate the fraction of snow. So we want those to be as close to the top as possible, kind of like in February. The green dots represent the fraction of precipitation falling as rain over that same period. And I should say this data set's a little bit shorter. It's about 8 years shorter because we didn't start collecting precipitation phase data at the Snow Lab until later in the 70s. But we did the same thing. We took a look at these fractions. We fit those Thiel-Sen slopes to them. Again, October and May have already transitioned. November looks like it'll transition within the next couple decades. This was done 5 years ago, so now within the next 15 years. And so on and so forth with other things. February has a bunch of red question marks in it because it seems to be the only month that's gaining snowfall instead of rain. Interestingly, I didn't put this in here because I didn't want to take up a bunch of time with it, but we see cooling in the atmosphere higher up during February. And if you've been around here for the last 5 years like I have, when have we gotten our cold storms? It's always like the 3rd or 4th week of February. Same thing this year. 9.5 feet at the Snow Lab later in February. Still not sure why that's happening. We have some theories. We're going to be looking into that. But February is the only month that has happily stayed with its snow consistently. As I put here at the bottom, we're transitioning pretty quickly. These Thiel-Sen slope lines are a great way to look at climate trends. The challenge with them is they're not dynamic. So this is conservative in terms of when we could transition. We're probably going to be doing that a lot faster than this is saying here. But the Central Sierra Rain Lab doesn't have quite the same ring to it, unfortunately. CSRL is a lot harder to say than CSSL. So, just to recap on that a little bit, we're seeing that this snow season is shortening, right? We're seeing our shoulder seasons getting longer, and it's shifting a little bit towards the spring because February is kind of developing itself as the primary snow month. We are seeing those warmer transitions. We're seeing rain, and again, this is one of those patterns that I've noticed since moving here. Almost every year in late December, we get a really heavy rainstorm. Inevitably, it'll probably transition to snow, but a couple decades ago, that more than likely would have been mostly snow. We see these temperature increases globally that are affecting us locally, of course. This rain-snow line that we talk about so much, very, very low with those February storms. We were having snow way down, 1,000, 2,000 feet in elevation, down 80, and it was fantastic. But unfortunately, that line is going up by about 100 meters a year. And that's very, very challenging because eventually that's going to tip over the top of us and we're going to lose our designation for snow. And then, again, snow common in February and March, but our conditions for consistent seasonal snowpack really aren't going to be prevalent for the months like we're used to seeing. And as a result, as we move towards rain on snow events, we get scenes like on the right-hand side here. That image on the top right is of Reno. For those of you that have been here for a long time or are aware of your history, 1997, New Year's, massive rainstorm, catastrophic flooding in Yosemite Valley and various other parts of the area. We're going to see more of that rain and midwinter rain and these potential events. On the bottom, that's a ski resort. A ski resort parking lot. That is in Australia, but believe it or not, the Australian snowpack and our snowpack have a lot of things similar. This is Perisher. If you have your Epic Pass, go ski it. It's actually really cool. Not this year. But this was a rain on snow event that occurred. There was about 2 meters, 6-7 feet of snow on the ground. It washed away every single bit of it by the time it was done. It was bare ground. So that's what we're seeing there. So this goes back to what Ann was saying. We're seeing this decrease in the Sierra snowpack as well over a large area. It's not just happening on the summit. If you're looking at this plot on the right, it looks kind of funky, but I'll tell you this. The blue line is what we call the natural line in this paper. That's if climate change hadn't already occurred. The black line is what we are currently experiencing at the time of publication of this paper, which was 8 years ago. So it's progressed since then even. And these RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5 lines, the purple and red, are effectively what we look at under climate change scenarios going forward. And if you look at the maps on the bottom, this is how much our snowpack is going to change. I'm not going to get super far into those numbers, but when we talk about recreation, the Snow Lab focuses on water. We get 30 to 50% of our water in this state from snowpack. It's a massive thing. And our snow water equivalent can be used as a proxy to a certain extent for snow cover as well, because as we get into the spring this time of year, the amount of water in the snowpack and the depth are very closely related because it's all super dense anyway. So we've already seen about a 20% reduction in snow water equivalent and a 30% increase in early season runoff. Something we're experiencing this year, right? Early season, we're already melting big time. If we don't get a handle on things, 73% loss of our snow water equivalent by the end of the century. So 73% loss of our snowpack. That means our days with snowpack will be fewer than they ever have been before and much shorter. So as Ann mentioned, there are other areas of disturbance that occur here, right? On the left, we have this increasing burn extent. If you look at the kind of top right of those 4 panels, that's specifically in the Sierra Nevada, that's enhancing this. My PhD work was in wildfire impacts to snowpack and water resources, so I could really nerd out on this for a long time, but I'm just going to say that's really increasing, which is challenging both in the summer from a recreation perspective, as Neil pointed out. Sorry. You're not Neil. As Ian. As Ian pointed out, Neil's my boss. He must be in the room with me somewhere right now. As Ian pointed out, I said it again. We're seeing these impacts in the summer as well. But we're also seeing these warming atmospheric rivers. That goes back to what we were talking about with this transition from from snow to rain. So, what we're going to experience going forward is something called snow drought. How many people think they know what's going to happen with El Nino when it kicks in later this year? By a show of hands. Who thinks they know what happens with a La Nina? Good. None of you raised your hands. We are in an increasingly difficult area to determine what things like the El Nino Southern Oscillation does, because we're kind of right on the dividing line. Down south, there's a little bit more information. Up north, there's more information. But when we talk about it here in the Central Sierra, Central Northern Sierra, it's really hard to figure out. But what we see is with snow drought, there's two different ways we can get it. One is called warm snow drought, where we are warming temperatures, so we're getting rain instead of snow. The other is effectively dry snow drought, which means we're not getting precipitation. Here in Truckee, we're going to keep about the same amount of precipitation according to climate models, but it's going to be rain. So that's increasing. And this is the rate at which we expect to see our snowpack decrease. This is a wonderful paper from Erica Surya, and I don't know if I say her last name right ever, but Surya Woodburn, along with some of our colleagues at DRI and various other places. But this is what we expect to see happen. So low to no snow years. No snow is that dark red color, low snow, which means we're at 30% or less of our peak snow water equivalent, 30% or less of our snowpack. That's what those colors are. Anything that's gray to blue is happier, in my opinion. I am a snowboarder after all, and I love snow. But you can see 2025, 2026 kind of has an interesting gap in it where we have a good year, and then we really start to accelerate the low to no snow years going forward. By 2045 or so, we start to see a dominant low to no snowpack, and by 2057, we have only occasional good snowpack and snowfall years. Primarily rain. So, to bring this all to a head here, this year is what we can expect more of. This is a perfect year to describe what we're going to see over the next couple decades. We had a seasonal snowpack, but it rained a lot. We had a lot of warm weather in between, and that's going to become more and more frequent. After that, we're going to transition to primarily rain, unfortunately. We may not have all that much snowpack at all. So the future looks a lot like this winter. It's going to be warm. We're going to see a lot of midwinter rain, and the variability between seasons will increase. Our atmospheric rivers are responsible for the vast majority of precipitation we get. They're expected to become less frequent, but more severe. So we're going to get more 9.5-foot February storms, punctuated by longer periods of dry. Again, similar to this winter. And there will be this prevalence of low to no snow winters that'll increase substantially. So, by a show of hands, who's feeling happy about the future? Right. Climate anxiety, climate change anxiety, it's something that I think we as scientists deal with on a regular basis, and it's hard to get your head around sometimes. It can be depressing, but one thing that helps me every day when I get home is my goofball of a dog, and I hope he does that for you as well. Do we have time for questions or later? Okay, cool.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. All right, David Reichel, the Executive Director of the Sierra Avalanche Center. Welcome. And then after David, we'll take questions for everybody.
Cool. I mean, thus far, this has felt kind of depressingly autobiographical, right? Like, I was evacuated from the Caldor fire for 2 weeks. I live in Myers. I walked my dog in the city snow for seasons afterwards. I've certainly seen that impacts. My insurance has been non-renewed. There's the economic impacts of like the impacts on all of our retail and our resorts and different outdoor stuff. So, yeah, good times. Now we're getting to my talk. So yeah, I'm the executive director of the Sierra Avalanche Center. I came to that position from being one of our professional observers. So we have a field staff of about 7 or 8 folks, 3 forecasters who are detailed here in Truckee to the Tahoe National Forest, Truckee Ranger District, and then 3 or 4 professional observers who work directly for the nonprofit who do similar snow and avalanche observations out in the field. And I definitely came to that from just being a snow enthusiast. So I want to spend just a couple minutes quickly talking about what the Sierra Avalanche Center is and what we do for any folks who aren't super familiar with us, who don't start your day by checking in the forecast. But that is the primary thing that we do. We produce an avalanche forecast every morning, all winter long. This is our website. That green kind of amoeba-looking polygon thing in the middle is our forecast area. On the day that I took that screenshot, it was low avalanche danger, so that's why it's green. Our website is kind of our primary thing that we own and control, and it's our primary tool for communicating this important information. In addition to that, we send the field staff out every day to get snow and avalanche observations, to dig holes in the snow, to take pictures, video, all of that sort of stuff. Our website also serves as the hub to sort of collect all of that information from the public who submit it as well, which is very helpful since our forecast area is like 1,500 square miles, and there's 3 or 4 are paid employees out in the field every day. It's very helpful to get all of the extra eyes on from the public. In addition, we do community awareness events at schools, various places, breweries and shops, and we also provide free motorized avalanche classes because there are none of those otherwise available to those users. Here's our website of the observation page, just to show you, this is from a snapshot. There are 54 in our map area. I think this is over the last 2 weeks. When I took this, I think over the weekend, just to show you kind of the range of where observations are coming in. This is just where people submitted stuff, but it's also quite consistent with what the previous presenters have been talking about with regards to where there's snow in our forecast area right now, right? Some of our lower elevation spots have already kind of lost snow for the season, and we're seeing increased concentration at the Mount Rose, Carson Pass, Donner Summit zones, and West Shore lower elevation places are getting a little pretty grim. And this is just zooming in on, that's Brandon Schwartz, our lead forecaster, doing what we do, digging a hole in the snow, kind of looking at the melt conditions. This is just a recent photo, so it's dealing with the same snow essentially that we have outside right now, looking at how much snow is melted on the surface, and then what is lying beneath that. The photo on the right is kind of a glide crack that we're monitoring out in the backcountry. We'll come back to that in just a minute. And then we produce these avalanche forecasts. So there's 2 major component parts to this. I'm just kind of doing this fast for this presentation, but we have our danger rating, the yellow that you see on the left there. And again, it was moderate on the day I took this screenshot. So we used the North American Avalanche Danger Scale, low, moderate, considerable, high, and extreme, to give people a general sense of what the avalanche danger is. That scale does have a fair bit of detail if you dig into it in more advanced applications in terms of probability of avalanche trigger, travel guidance, various things. And then the other really important part of the avalanche forecast is when we discuss the avalanche problem of the day. So avalanches change throughout the season, and the avoidance techniques that people need to use change as well. So the avalanche problem is a really important part of our forecast as well, and generally speaking, I think the public doesn't quite appreciate that enough. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then just to recap, we do free motorized avalanche classes, brewery, shop, school presentations, and then in the spring we put on the the fall, we put on the California Avalanche Workshop, which is a pre-season regional snow and avalanche workshop to help get all kind of snow enthusiasts head back in the game and ready for winter. Cool. For professional development, for folks like our forecasters and our higher level avalanche nerd staff, there aren't that many options. And the primary thing that we've identified is the International Snow Science Workshop, which is a global snow nerd conference that happens every 2 years. In 2024, it was in Norway. In 2026, in the end of September, October, it'll be in Whistler, and then it'll be in Utah in 2028. So the sort of science part of my talk is coming from stuff I learned at the most recent conference in Norway. It's consistent with what we've heard already this morning. So this is me just sort of searching all of the records from that conference, and slush flows, which aren't avalanches, but are kind of what they sound like, really low angle flows of slushy stuff coming down the mountain and have impacts similar to avalanches on infrastructure like railways and highways and things like that. It's an increasing area of focus from this conference. Rain on snow events, which have been mentioned already, are also increasing emphasis. Dr. Ann Hegley from DRI, who's also involved in the Rain on Snow and Rain or Snow project, had a paper at that conference. And then climate change was mentioned in essentially every single paper at this conference. So there was a cool review that was published as part of this conference that I'm going to use as the basis of the science part of my talk. And a review is, just that, right? A group of a half dozen or so really smart PhD folks looked at all of the literature out there and kind of summarized it in a review in terms of what is the impact of climate change on avalanche activity, essentially. So it was actually fairly short. I want to say it's like 2 or 3 pages, depending on how it's formatted, but it's quite dense, right? And so for a recovering snowboarder like myself, it was pretty hard to read. And I've done my best to take this 3 or so page dense academic thing and kind of shrink it down to like 3 paragraphs. There is going to be some like words on the screen, and you're just going to have to deal with that. I know that's bad PowerPoint etiquette, but too bad. So on the right are just like cool photos I took from Tromsø, Norway, which is insane. Norway is absolutely remarkable. Insane. Anyway, so this is the takeaway. Unfortunately, it's completely consistent with what we've heard already today. There is now clear evidence for a gradual reduction of overall avalanche numbers, their sizes, and the number of active paths, and these changes can be ascribed to increasingly scarcer snow conditions. Not a shock given what we've already heard this morning, but the season is shrinking, right? If there's less snow, generally speaking, early season and late season, it's less time in terms of the calendar for avalanches to occur. And then also we're seeing these changes happen much more quickly at the lower elevations. So there's just less terrain in mountains where there's snow consistently, thus less likelihood for avalanches, generally speaking. Make sense? Not really a shock. This is the one that's a little bit harder for brains. But by contrast, there's a transient state of increased avalanche activity exists at very high elevations, where winter conditions will still be cold enough for the anticipated increased extreme precipitation to fall as snow. So the previous statement holds true, but there's still going to be at higher, maybe very high elevations, cold enough temps for snow to fall, and when some of those storms hit those areas, because of overall warmer temps, that stormfall might be extreme within those areas. So less area, but more extreme snowfall, which is kind of a challenging, paradoxical idea to hold in your head at the same time while we're discussing all this other stuff. But I think it is consistent with what we see. We'll come back to this a little bit more. Also, again, Norway, beautiful. At the same time, the season during which wet avalanches can occur is becoming longer, whereas the proportion of dry snow avalanches, especially powder snow avalanche, is decreasing. If anyone loves spring skiing, I guess there's some cause for joy there, but for those of us who love powder, maybe less. Again, very consistent to what we've been hearing thus far. Okay, so not sure you all can see this super well, but there's 9 avalanche problems, 3 rows of 3 there. And those avalanche problems, again, are like one of the primary tools that we use to communicate what the specific type or character of the avalanche problem is on any given day. And yeah, this is there's a couple different models in the planet, but this is the one that we use here. It's the most common one used in the US. And then I highlighted the wet loose and the wet slab in the middle there. These two are the ones that are clearly winning, right? These are the avalanche problems. It's what we forecasted today. We forecasted wet loose. We've mostly been forecasting that for the last week or so. And the wet loose and wet slab are the avalanche problems that, given what we just heard earlier today and what I quoted from that paper, what we'd expect to see increasing commonly, increasing in their forecasting. Glide avalanche as well, but glide's a little bit weird. We can talk about that briefly in a second. But yeah, the 2 primary ones are wet loose and wet slab. We will see more warmth, more rain, all that sort of stuff. The storm slab one is a little bit more complicated. That already is a very common avalanche problem that we forecast. But it's the one where I could see it's sort of increasing, or at least increasing in its complexity and challenge from our perspective in terms of forecasting accurately, where at the highest elevations we see potentially really extreme increases in snowfall rates. And that photo is from January this year, skinning up above Emerald Bay, really beautiful. My friend's, wearing a t-shirt there, and we got passed at the top by like a dude in shorts and no shirt, right? This is January, the middle of January in Tahoe. Cool, so wet loose, I don't know if folks can see, but this is an example photo on the right. There's just some classic wet loose avalanches there. Again, this is what we're forecast today. These are a very common avalanche problem. They're not the ones the public necessarily is the most concerned about and is responsible for a ton necessarily of serious avalanche accidents or fatalities, but it certainly can. During our huge winter 3 years ago now, I guess, kind of amazingly, we had no fatalities in California all winter, and then there was one in June and I think another one in July in the Eastern Sierra, high up in the mountains. There were these sorts of avalanches, right? The snow still lasted until that time period, and I think, so they absolutely can be significant. Wet slab, similar, but like there's a buried weak layer, maybe a buried surface ore or a crust or something within the snowpack somewhere, and we get water moving down through the snowpack, it hits that weak layer or that crust, and it creates a slab avalanche, but it's wet. The basics of this are totally understood, but they're actually very complex. The way what water does when it hits snow is weird, and it depends on lots of variables. And I have a personal sort of maybe parochial bias towards like the Sierra and California, and in my space, Colorado and continental, sort of the middle of a continent, snowpacks I think have historically dominated a lot of the scientific research, and I think slightly because of that, some of these wetter problems have less like decades of great research on. So as we see these becoming more and more common, I think it's really incumbent on us in the profession and in the research arms of this space to do more work on this, because these are a real challenge to forecast as well as we need to. And then glide, again, coming back to this photo, glide avalanches are absolutely a thing. They tend to be in kind of the same spot, right? So they're a little bit less random than some of the other avalanche problems. But if anyone's ever been frustrated because it's a big winter and Tioga Pass Road hasn't opened, in June when you want it to drive over to the west side from Lee Vining or whatever, oftentimes it's because there's a glide crack and a glide avalanche threatening the west side of like Tenaya Lake. And it happens all the time. It's almost an annual thing for them. And operationally, like it's a challenge. So where these things do happen, we may see more of them because of all the things we've been talking about. Okay, and this is the tougher one. I put the words back on there just to maybe help us with. But this is the increased potential for increased extreme precipitation at highest elevations, which may lead to increased storm slab problems or challenges for us. A couple things there. It says exists at very high elevations. It's, I'm not sure Tahoe has much very high elevations, right? So this may not be our problem because this is going to pass us pretty quickly. But obviously these things vary, and at some points in winters we will get extreme precip events that can lead to this. But storm slab is one of our most common avalanche problems that we used. Essentially every time that we get a storm of a foot or more snow in a short amount of time, we'll probably be forecasting storm slab. And there could be a couple of component parts to it, but one of the ways that it can happen is just a really high intensity of snowfall. So if it snowed, I'm setting myself up to like embarrass myself with math here, but let's say we get 12 inches or 2 feet, we get 2 feet of snow in 24 hours, right? I'm not great at math, but I'm pretty sure that's an inch an hour, right? 24 inches in 24 hours. Got that one. There's still a possibility that I screw this up, but like we could imagine that happens an inch an hour, right? Or you could maybe imagine, I'm not even going to try this, but like for a portion of that, it snowed for 4 inches an hour. Or for a portion of that, it snowed for 6 inches an hour, right? And so those portions of that 24-hour period where we had really incredible snowfall, that would be the the layer within that new storm, that 2 feet of new storm snow, where we would expect to see instability. Did I get that right? So it could be like really intense, within this storm, and that's something that we see and is absolutely a concern. We don't have great remote weather stations on every peak. We don't have it at every elevation. There's gaps. This can be hard to forecast from the office at 4 in the morning, right? To like know what happened overnight and then to anticipate what might happen in the next 12 hours. So this is a challenge. I think this photo might be a little bit washed out, but that's from the west side of Andesite Peak from 2024. Pretty impressive storm slab event that our forecasters documented on that day. So if anyone's curious, this is the paper that I'm sort of leaning on hard for what I've done thus far. It's from the International Snow Science Workshop 2024, and issw.net is the website where you can search all of papers from that workshop. That workshop's great. Yeah. So I feel pretty solid on everything I just said. That was very much grounded in, I think a very strong review of the literature. But what does it actually mean for us, for backcountry travelers, for all of that? I feel less comfortable with this because there hasn't been as much research that I have found. Like the hard physical science is pretty solid. The sort of like slightly fuzzier social science, the psychology, the human factors, all of this is a lot messier. There's also we have a bias in the snow space towards the snow labs and the measuring of the hard science, and we haven't had as much psychology and all of that sort of behavioral economics and all of that. So like if avalanches decrease 10%, 20%, 30%, I don't necessarily think that it's appropriate for us to assume that's going to really equal a commensurate decrease in human involved avalanches. If the snow sucks around where I am, I'm going to go to where the snow is. And I imagine we've all seen various bits of that, right? We'll go to higher trailheads, we'll get on planes, we'll drive, we'll do what we need to do. We will seek out where the snow is because that's what people who love snow do. The reality is that most avalanches are just natural things that happen in the backcountry and we never even notice, and they have no impact on us. We only care about a very small portion of avalanches that interact with human beings or infrastructure or something like that. So an overall general significant decrease in the number of avalanches may not, it's not appropriate for us to assume that means that it's going to be safer for us. I think that this presents challenges as well. So scarcity is a really well-known driver of avalanche accidents where, for whatever reason, if it's been a crap winter and all of a sudden the good storm comes in, backcountry enthusiasts go a bit nuts and we really go out there and have powder frenzy. I imagine many of us have been to a Bluebird powder day at a resort and the average IQ is not very high, right? I've been in that line, I know. And that's widespread, that's challenging. You can imagine the scarcity, we don't even know scarcity yet, right? Go ahead 5-10 years and imagine what that's gonna be like, and it could be a serious challenge. So from an avalanche forecaster, avalanche center perspective, these are things that we really want to think about and try and help our public, help our community recognize and mitigate. The next snow science workshop is coming up in Whistler in a few months, and I'm excited to go up there and get updated on this stuff and bring our staff up there. If anyone's interested, the California Avalanche Workshop will be October 25th in Kings Beach. This is going to be 2 or 3 weeks after the International Snow Science Workshop, so a big component of this will be kind of report backs from that workshop where we share, it's going to cost money, but we're going to send a good portion of our staff to the ISSW and then make them kind of share their highlights with the public at this event locally. Cool. That's what I got. Thank you.
All right, I know I said we'd do questions after David, but to give Sherry McConkey her time for her stump speech, let's do that. So Sherry McConkey with the Shane McConkey Foundation. Come on up. How are you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I am the founder and the director of the Shane McConkey Foundation. Over the past 15 years, our foundation has donated over $1 million to nonprofits and causes that we really care about. And then one of the things that I love most about what the Shane McConkey Foundation does is called the Shane McConkey Eco Challenge. This is a nationwide competition where students find a problem in their environment or their community, and they come up with a solution, and they actually do something about it. And these kids are incredible. We've had so many incredible projects, and just to name a few, because I only have 5 minutes. Students have removed thousands of toxic golf balls from the Pebble Beach to create Pebble Beach Golf Course in front of the Pebble Beach Golf Course, and created a year-round cleanup program. Students have built community gardens. They've also had their schools' water systems tested, finding lead, and then pushed the schools to get filters installed into multiple schools. And then the list goes on. If you want to find more information about all the projects that these Eco Challenge kids have done, you can go to shanemcconkey.org. But the thing that I like most about the Eco Challenge is these students are not just talking about change. They're actually making change happen. They learn how to start something, and they actually finish it, which is huge. They learn how to present problems. They learn how to problem solve, and they rally their friends and families. The most important, they realize that they can actually make a difference in these challenges. We award winning students $27,000 in prize money across 4 categories, from Green Circle, which is more of a beginner challenge, all the way up to extreme. And over the years, more than 3,500 students have participated nationwide. This last year, when I was honestly scared that we might not have as many submissions, our Eco Challenge doubled. So that just shows you that these students are needing things to happen. Our kids are paying attention. They're seeing what's happening. They know the world is hurting. And here's the hard truth. They're the ones that will have to fix what we didn't. But the beautiful part is they're not waiting. They're leading. And they're doing the work right now. These students are not just talking about change. They're becoming it. One of our favorite local project winners from the 2020 Eco Challenge started a program called Don't Drop the Top. They collected bottle caps and turned them into beautiful benches. The Shane McConkey Foundation loved this program so much that we adopted it with Ashley Perkins, who's the Truckee Elementary vice principal. And we made this into a real thing in our community. We've now we now have 11 collection sites in the Truckee, all the way from Truckee to Incline. People drop off their clean tops, hopefully, and we turn them into beautiful benches and garden boxes, which has started being distributed all over our town. We have now made over 70 benches and garden boxes and donated at least half of them and to our schools and our community. So this, we've collected over 8,200 pounds, so if you can imagine what 8,200 pounds is, it's the size of 2 full-grown elephants, which is quite a lot. And this is just in 4 years. Every year, no, sorry, I'm missing this. So in order to do all this, we have 2 big fundraisers every year. One is our Nutty Golf Tournament in Tar City, and the other one is called the Pain McConkey, which is happening this weekend. Athletes dress in costume, and they race on snowblades down what hopefully we'll call the mountain if there's snow. And then we have a very fun party on the sun deck at Palisades. It's ridiculous in the best way possible. And then every year, we give away $10,000 to a nonprofit. It's always a surprise till Saturday, and this year it's a really good one. We also give out the NAR Award to somebody who's just an all-round incredible human, and that's in honor of the late Rob Gaffney. And then every year, we award the Shane McConkey Scholarship to students from North Lake Tahoe and Truckee High School, totaling $5,000. And then the reason why this all happens, it's in honor of my late husband, Shane McConkey. If you don't know Shane, there's a really cool documentary on Amazon Prime called McConkey, and I highly recommend it. It's hilarious, it's also sad, and it's also very inspiring. But in short, he was an incredible athlete, a total goofball, and someone who truly lived his life in a bold and joyful way. He didn't take himself too seriously, but he cared deeply about people in this world and about doing good. So everything we do at our foundation is really about carrying his spirit forward, having fun, giving back, and hopefully making a little dent in this world in a good way. So thank you for listening, and thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Sherry. Okay, we will take a few questions here, and then we'll go around and do stump speeches. Who has questions for any of the speakers? Oh, man. All right. Let them off here, huh? No questions? I know. Everybody's sad. Everybody's going to do the reverse move to Vermont now. We have so many Vermonters here. It's like, oh, God, let's go back there. All right. Yes.
This applies to all of you. Thank you so much for coming to speak today. So as we're looking at snowpack and climate change and the warmth of different areas, are there any areas that will see new snowpack in, or continued snowpack, or more snowpack? Because if we're getting warmer, are other places getting cooler? Or is there some kind of tribulation of that?
That's a really good question. Thanks. So the question is, are there any places that are getting colder as we're getting warmer and maybe snowpack's growing elsewhere? So snow happens because of two things. One is temperature. It has to be cold enough to snow. And then the other is precipitation. You have to have a source of moisture to create the conditions for snowpack. And so globally, temperatures have increased everywhere. And there's really no mountain region where temperatures have decreased. There is one mountain region where snowpack has increased, and that's the Pamirs in central western Asia. And that the reason isn't because it's getting colder, it's because there's a shift in the storm track, bringing more precipitation, and that's causing the glaciers to actually increase ever so slightly there. But glaciers are a real good indicator too, but everywhere else glaciers are decreasing. Glaciers, of course, are made out of snow. So yeah, it's kind of a global bummer.
Great question.
But you know, I want to say, like, I think a couple people hit on this. The fact that dry spells are increasing. So as we know in California, our dry spells have been increasing over the last several decades in terms of the frequency of midwinter dry spells and the length of those dry spells. This winter was a really good example of that, right? January into February, so dry. But the intensity of precipitation is increasing too, and that big storm, that was really intense. And the reason is because a warming atmosphere can hold more moisture. And so when you have increasing temperatures, it can hold more moisture if you have a source of that moisture, if the storm track can get through this big high pressure ridge that we've had. And so when we do have a big storm, it can actually be more extreme. And so we can anticipate, based on the recent decades and what our climate models are showing us, more frequent and somewhat longer midwinter dry spells, which have a lot of impacts on snowpack and avalanche safety. And then when we have a big storm, it might be more intense. It's likely that it would be. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I had kind of two questions. One was, I think what I gathered was that precipitation, in terms of amount, is kind of staying relatively the same despite the changes. And my kind of question is really, when we sort of think about like precipitation, and again, the ratio between like snow and rain is kind of changing more towards rain, that sort of thing. What does that sort of mean for like water retention, like in a watershed, I guess? What does that sort of overall mean? I mean, is it just passing through quicker, or is it, I mean, it seems like with more snow, if heavy snows, it would be staying longer throughout the year, but now it seems like going to rain, it's just more fluid, just gravity's doing its work. So that was one question.
Ann stood up, so I'm going to stand up too.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some real nuances to that, and it's a really good question. With so much of our water coming from snow, the nice thing about snow is that it's its own reservoir. It's its own water tower. So as it sits on the ground, it's consistently giving the ecosystem the water it needs. And then when our temperatures warm up in the spring, it releases and fills up our reservoirs. So something that's interesting is when we switch terrain, you're right, it's not really going to stay on the landscape very well. It's going to run off a lot quicker and out of the watershed. And that poses issues not necessarily for most of us in the room, but for water managers. For instance, this year, generally speaking, we consider the storm season over after the April 1st mark because April 1st tends to be when our snowpack is biggest. So most of the reservoirs in California don't start collecting water until after April 1st when they're full because they need to be able to also mitigate flood risk with incoming storms. And so right now, because they're full, they can't bring more water in, or at least they couldn't have, say, a month ago, because we could still get an atmospheric river that could cause flooding, and if you overtop your dam, that's a really bad thing. So switching terrain means we don't have that storage system in the catchment itself. It's going to run off and downhill much faster, and it's going to be a lot harder to manage. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah. So second part, kind of to Nolin, I think, was, so right now, the world premiere kind of national atmospheric research center in Colorado is in the crosshairs of the Trump administration for political reasons. They think it's like, they think what they think, but the special pet project of Russell Bolt. But I'm wondering from kind of a resiliency and adaptation standpoint, I mean, we only have so much limited energy. I feel in politics, it's just you're just talking to a stone wall when we talk to our representatives about this type of thing. I mean, again, research is good. It helps us understand. It helps us, prepare for the future, that sort of thing. That's being compromised, I think, for the foreseeable future. Where should we put our efforts? I mean, again, as I say, the political thing's broken. And it just seems like, there's things that we could do, should do, maybe collectively or in our own personal lives.
Yeah, okay. So I'll speak as a member of the Science Alliance for Protect Our Winters, and also as a lifelong skier and someone who teaches climate change at the university and is an eternal optimist. I really am, kind of a Pollyanna. So I am. But, right, so I think the question is, like, what can we do in the face of the challenges that we are facing, maybe the political headwinds and policy issues, and then just the general challenge of, like, what can I do as just one human being? Can I do anything? Maybe I should just throw up my hands and go, no more down jackets forever. I think a couple things. One is collective action. So as just one human being, I like to think that I can be responsible about stuff. And I am, and I've designed my life around, I have a really comfortable life, but I drive an electric car, my house is all electric, we've got a big solar installation in the backyard, but I'm really privileged. Most people aren't, right? And so I'm able to do those things. But I think that even if you don't have the capacity to do that kind of stuff, what you can do is collective action, right? Because one voice is sort of, you feel like you're in the wilderness, but a lot of voices makes change. And what makes change that matters is policy. And policy makes changes that anybody can do. Remember when we had 30% rebate for solar? I took advantage of that. It was for the installation, the cost of the panels, like the whole bit. And so that was a big deal. It made it affordable. Any kind of policy change can benefit people. But how do you get policy change? Collective action. And that's the thing that makes you feel good about doing things with people. It makes you happy because you're doing things with your community, and it matters. That's how we make change. So whatever that collective action might be, my choice is to work with Protect Our Winners because they actually do make a difference. Last spring, I went with PAL to Washington, D.C., and we met with members of Congress and their staffers for 2 solid days. I met with 14 different offices, Republicans and Democrats, both mainly Republicans. Really cool. But the other thing, run for office. You can make a change, even if it's like just a little office. It makes a difference. So those 2 things: collective action, run for office, don't get depressed, do a thing.
And know who your candidates support. Know what your candidates support. If you're not going to run, know what the candidates are supporting, because that goes a long way too.
Yeah, and join PAL.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, we're going to do stump speeches, but before we do that, let's give a big round of applause to all the speakers this morning. Okay, let's keep the stump speeches very quick so we can get everybody out of here with the door prizes. Who has stump speeches? Yes, Jessica.
Because you just said to run for office, we have our first How to Run for Office workshop on April 29th from 10 to 2:30. It is free. We have 32 open positions in our region as far as elected offices coming up. So if you are interested in running for office locally, please talk to me and we can get you signed up for that.
Yes, we lack in snow, but not governmental agencies in Truckee. Plenty of them. Yes, Rob.
Because I am in office. Quickly, I know you all watch us every fourth Thursday, so for those of you that haven't, on the board, Anna Roth, our CEO, came as new, and I've been here a year. The first 6 months, she did a lot of listening to our community members and to everyone here. At the end of this year, she does have a goal, which she brought to the board, on our community, which includes both 5,000 voices, 4,000 voices, that we want to hear yours. This is going to help us lead us to the next, help you. So please help me as a board member. We're here to represent you, so please take this survey. It's short, it took me a few minutes to do, and it'll help us guide us. To kind of continue on with the community and this topic, in our community goals, our President and CEO, Anna Roth, obviously listens to our community, understands that we're going to bring back these 5,000 voices to our community pillar. We're going to have a community health improvement, which is brought every 3 years, which for the first time, I'm very glad she is bringing and realized to have a environmental stewardship. So that includes what we talked here. Quickly, what does that mean? It means that we're just learning a lot. Last month, we had a local consultant go through our trash. Lovely. Good news is 43% of the hospital's trash is recyclable. 10 to 60% is usually kind of the hospitals around the country. 29% actually is stuff that's in the break room, which makes me realize personally, what can we do each about environmental? And so more to come, but I just wanted to kind of give an update. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Good.
Support the Museum of Truckee History at the end of the month on the 27th. You'll see posters around town with a little steamboat on Donner Lake with it. Heidi Kuzma is going to be showing Steamboat Bill Jr. with her ensemble in the old rec center on Church Street. And then Saturday morning, the 28th, we're going to have Mark McLaughlin, the Storm King, and then Dave Antonucci talking about the Sierra ski industry. So come on out to that. It'll be a good time.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wanted to do a shameless plug for my best friend wrote a book called Raising Anti-Doomers. She is a licensed psychotherapist in Berkeley and just wrote a book on how to support like those who work with children, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a medical professional, on how to address eco-anxiety, because again, I know I'm not a parent yet, but it definitely impacts my decision on having children of the type of world that we're bringing them in. So Raising Anti-Doomers by Ariella Cook-Shunkoff. I just wanted to put a plug. You can find it on Amazon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amber.
My name is Amber Dotson with Saturday Photography. This Saturday I have a couple spots left for mini sessions for senior portraits, and $50 will be donated back to Project Grad, which is to keep them from not drinking and driving on the graduation night. So anyway, just see me afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
On March 25th, that's next Wednesday, the Truckee Cultural District is hosting a creatives meetup from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Steve Randall Community Rec Center. Encouraging all of you that want to support the arts and the creative economy here that we have in Truckee, which is part of that resiliency climate model that we referenced today. And also to be a part of the collective action in making sure that we continue our funding for the cultural district as well as for the arts in the state. Please join us 5:30 to 6:30 at the rec center.
Thank you. But yeah, yes.
Yeah, as I mentioned, just a visitor here, but I am working on a local project along the lines of kind of emissions reduction, and it's on a personal level. But again, I'm looking for any contractors or folks who are knowledgeable in this area. But I'm looking at a carbon sequestration project involved with building a house. So like a foundation needs lots of concrete. Concrete produces CO2, kind of equal parts to the amount of concrete. And so I'm looking at a way to kind of reduce that. A lot of good technology out there. I'm going the route of like what's called biochar and integration into the concrete. But again, it's a whole new area, and it's like I read the papers and I look for local folks who can help me do this, and pretty scant on that. But again, it's one of the things that I feel like I can do with like 145 yards of concrete that I can get so much carbon sequestration in it, and really makes a difference. But understanding that and learning about that's a whole nother thing. I'd love to make it into business if I could really pin it down well. So just
thank you.
Anyone interested, come talk to me.
Okay, well, that concludes our, March? Good Morning Truckee. Again, thank you to everybody that came. Thank you to all our speakers. It was a very informative one this morning. And we'll see you next month in April, and it will be, I believe, on tracking the wolf pack. So wolves update.
Yeah.